We will then, because we're running out of time, we will continue with the second panel and last panel on proposing sustainable and long-term advocacy and cooperation paths towards zero segregation in education. My name is Belén Sánchez Rubio. I'm from the Fundación Secretariado Gitano from Spain, and I'm really delighted to be in this panel. Just before we start, just to say that I believe one of the most important aspects to be able to advocate and cooperate to achieve zero educational segregation is actually to name the problem, because we know that what is not named does not exist. And this is particularly important when we deal with a reality that actually goes against human rights standards. Therefore, we need to name it. We need to name it very loud. We know that we are also confronting a very complex issue. This has been stated through the session today. First, because there is a political and social resistance to acknowledge the existence of segregation. We also know it's complex because there's a diversity of segregating situations, and there's lack of data to acknowledge the diversity of situations, and therefore the lack of indicators. Even though we know and we've witnessed today that there's some progress on the way, and we should be happy for that. We also know that fighting against segregation, it is complex in the sense that it requires long-term policy approach. There's no one easy solution to it, and the challenge is actually to identify what would be the best responses for each of these diverse segregated situations. We need to be able to measure. This has been said also, and monitoring progress, because in the fight against segregation, we clearly need informed policies. That's the way forward for everything, actually any public policy, but on segregation is clearly the way forward. In this sense, we believe that EU institutions can play a crucial role in putting school segregation in the political agenda. We've seen already with the FRA colleague, Andrei Ivanov, that there are some steps in this sense, and we really want to call the Commission to keep in this path because we need them to put this issue in the agenda at the EU level, and how this will trigger down to the national and the regional sphere, even the local, as it was said before. We need the EU institutions to provide with policies and fundings to do so, and also with a portfolio of indicators, as is the example of the FRA. But we also believe that we first need a common definition of segregation, which we do not have. So that would be the first step. To then start with baseline indicators, a selection of indicators to understand how and what is the dimension and the different forms of segregation across the EU, and be able to monitor the progress. And lastly, we need a provision of instruments to fight segregation. This certainly can be channeled through the National Roma Strategic Framework. We believe this would be the core instrument, but we need not to forget that the school segregation also needs to be acknowledged and included in mainstream policies. That is the case, as it was mentioned, of the child guarantee. And it's also the case for any EU national or regional educational policies. There needs to be some coherence between the different instruments, and there needs to be synergies to that end. We understand EU institutions are taking step forwards in this regard, and here today, the panel today is to actually we actually already listened to the FRA because he had to leave, but we have the honor to also listen to the Commission, DG Employment, to see what are the steps that are being taken in this regard, in the search for zero segregation of Roma children. And we also have online the Council of Europe representative who will be also speaking of a specific experience. So without more delay, I will just give now the floor to Jeroen Jut. I don't know if I pronounced that well. So he's the head of unit from DG Employment, and we kindly ask him to report and share with us the monitoring indicators in segregation in education that that they are dealing with. So I will just give you the floor immediately so we don't lose more time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I will try to keep it short, also because much of what I intended to say has already been said. And so I will just take out a number of aspects that I believe is most important. the first point, so like I said, I'm responsible for, in DG Employment, for the European Social Fund in Bulgaria and Romania. Obviously, two countries with important inequality issues, Roma integration issues, quality of education issues. So that makes that often in this position one is confronted, of course, with the question here today. And if I look globally at these two countries, what you see is these countries are confronted with a huge demographic change. And it's not only about many people that have left the countries to work in other countries, it is also about the birth rate. And in fact, also differences in birth rate between different population groups. And the share of young Roma in the total share of young people will increase. So we are meeting a double challenge. Not only the challenge of reducing segregation, but also reducing segregation in a context where the pressure is towards increased segregation. And with a track record that was, let's say it politely, far from perfect. So we're trying to duck a negative trend in a context that pushes us towards a more negative trend. And it's our ambition to make progress in this context. And that will be obviously difficult, and it has been said, one needs the support of many. But it is not only about the morality of the issue, the ethics of the issue, equality. It is also very simple, an economic necessity. If I take Bulgaria as an example, between today and 2030, the working age population will go down by roughly 10%. In Romania, slightly less, 8%. That has a huge economic impact. And it means that you need to see in those groups that have low educational attainment, links to high unemployment, how can we change things around? And more in the long term, obviously, how can we get the outcome of educational systems to a higher level, less dropouts, better degrees, higher education degrees for more people. And you cannot do that if you don't include everybody. So inclusion, covering everybody, every citizen, is really at the heart not only of social policy, education policy, but ultimately of also sound economic policy, sustainable growth. So this is really, I think, the whole thing. And we all know that higher levels of education, if you look at OECD data, every year that you add to the level of education of a person, on average, people earn more, have a better health, and so forth, and are happier, importantly, and so forth, and so forth. And then there is also an impact in terms of intergenerational transmission, not only of poverty, but especially for those that go out of poverty, in terms of doing well later in life for the next generation and the generation. So this all compounds upon it. You create a positive dynamic, and it is possible. We have seen this in many cases. It is possible, and so I would say a positive dynamic, a positive can-do attitude, but based on data, based on good policy examples is key. And for good policy, we need, first of all, we need to have some ambition. And here the European Union, I think, has made a very important step in 2020. It came out with the EU Roma Strategic Framework for Equality, Inclusion and Participation that sets very clear targets. Ambitious targets, too ambitious, I don't know. It sets targets, and targets are key for accountability and transparency. You know whether you've succeeded, you know whether you failed, or whether you did something in between, and you can assess why is this the case. And to assess why this is the case, why is it today that 51% of Roma children in Romania and 64% of Roma children in Bulgaria attend schools where all or most schoolmates are Roma? This we can only do with data. And we have heard today that in the field of data, and we see this every day in our work, in the field of data, there's a bit of trouble. We have no consistent national level data annually at any level, basically. We have obviously very important survey data from the EU Agency for Fundamental Rights, but it only comes so often. It is, let's say, incomplete at best. Then we have administrative data, in some countries better than in others. We call on Romania to see what can be done, obviously, to work on that, to improve the rate of replies and the quality of the data. Then we have a lot of incidental survey data, often hard to compare, and then what I would call anecdotal data. And we try to hustle this all together to see what can work, what is it that we can move forward on, and what are the lessons also in terms of policy implementation that can be drawn. But what is important, though, is that this data collection system needs continuous attention. Now, having said that, it is likely and reasonable to assume that this system will remain in the next 10 years far from perfect for a variety of issues. For example, there's always a sensitivity to collecting data on ethnicity. There is the question whether people actually that one may consider Roma feel Roma, and all these kind of questions that go. So we have to accept that in the years to come there will also be an imperfect data set, and so, as also came across, we have to use data that is highly correlated. So if we look at schools, for example, in Romania, it was also discussed earlier, for European funding, a method is used that looks at dropout rates, at the marks that kids have, and so forth. And in fact, if you look then at the outcome, the use of this official data correlates very, very strongly with schools in marginalized communities, schools that have a high segregation rate. And in this way, we can target funding, we can target training, and a variety of measures that can really then, in this indirect way of targeting, lead to the better outcomes. And this is what is being done. I think in segregation, Diane made a very important point, but I'm not sure it was, it came out because it was really in a context of a lot of information there. But I want to make it very explicit. If we look at segregation, and you have to consider also that the funding levels that we have a limit. Even if we are going to fund, certainly in the coming years, much more, there are limits to it. And so there's a distinction between urban areas and rural areas. And it is in rural areas that it's more expensive, more difficult to really address segregation and to have a high impact. It is, for example, a question whether you want to drive kids around from one school to another if they have to sit 1 hour in the bus. There's a high cost. Is it not better, and I simplify here, I oversimplify here, is it not better to put the cost of that transport, the transport that might help desegregation, to rather put it in the quality of the school? Yeah. But in urban areas, it's different. In urban areas, looking at how kids are inscribed, how transport is organized, how the statistics are impacted by the data that was shown, for example, in do children live in an area that is predominantly Roma or not, and so forth. Here we can do something, and here we should do something, and here we should target, I believe, to move also on the policy ambitions that we have before us. And the last point I want to make in this context is that obviously the right policy, a key component, and was said as well, cannot only be made, of course, by looking at what has been done, looking at the statistics in whatever form they take, but it is about the political will dimension and the engagement dimension, and the sense of community was set. It is only through this engagement and the political will not only on the national level, but especially political will on the local level, that that I believe many answers and many, let's say, where really a lot of progress is depending upon. And in this context, we are moving forward for the next programming period with much more conditionality attached to funding for local development. That local development in areas that have big Roma community should not be financed if it is not also including the Roma integration dimension, be it in education, in social services, in housing, or if you look at public space, where, for example, you have a street, but it is not recognized as a street in the cadastre, and therefore there is no public investment. All these things come together. So the engagement component is vital to create ownership, engagement on all levels, political level, administrative level, NGOs, local representatives, maybe consultants financed by the Council of Europe. We're going to hear about them. Of course, the European level, the Roma representatives, all these, nothing will happen if they don't talk together, if there's not a two-way street. And so all these things must come together. And that is what I wanted to say. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Jeroen. I think I would take the sentences you said, that we are fighting against the wind in a way. I mean, I make up this conclusion, but that it's still possible. And so we need to,
there's a way.
Yeah, political will, but also link this political with the funding, because sometimes we know the funding is there, but you know that it's not being used to this purpose. So thank you very much. I will just give now the floor to Dennis Durmish from the Roma and Traveller team of the Council of Europe. He will be talking about the in-school project. I don't know if he's there. Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent.
Okay, go ahead, Dennis.
Thank you, Belen. Thank you, colleagues, dear members of the European Parliament, dear distinguished colleagues. My name is Dennis Durmish. I am part of the Romani Travelers team of the Council of Europe, and among other things, I am managing European Union and Council of Europe joint project, which in school, which stands for Inclusive Schools Making a Difference for Roma Children. Perhaps because many things have been said in the previous sessions and in the panels, I will try to summarize my presentation in a way that I'll try to focus and speak about the available policy and legal guidance by the Council of Europe when it comes to Roma inclusion and quality and inclusive education. And then on the second part, I will also try to describe a little bit on the in-school project and the use of and how the project is using and promoting quality and inclusive education. Before that, I just want to make an interesting connection to our colleague from the European Union. Because he was also speaking about connecting and creating conditionalities between the funding and the policies. One of the specific objectives of the in-school project starting this year will be also to make that connection when it comes to three thematic areas. One is to bring closer the inclusive mainstream education policy together to the Roma inclusion policies within the country. And the third aspect, thematic, will be to look at the existing EU funding mechanism at the national level in order to create these synergies and an effective mechanism for a bigger impact. I know the ambition or the goal is quite challenging and ambitious in principle, but we are set to initiate this work across our project. Allow me to focus first a little bit on the available policy and legal guidance. The Council of Europe, as a standard-setting organization, has developed and promoted a number of recommendations to public authorities with the intention to promote quality and inclusive education and for Roma inclusion. As for example, there is a Council of Europe Committee of Ministers recommendation to member states on the education of Roma and travelers, or the recommendation from 2012 on ensuring quality education are only some that provide specific and thematic guidance based on the principles of human rights, non-discrimination, equality, and participation. It is therefore important to bring into light this international policy guidance by the Council of Europe, the European Union, and other international organizations when discussing national level policy and legal adaptations. I'm going to make a reference later on again, but we at the moment also have several member states discussing these possible policy or legal adaptations in order to accommodate or to put segregation or desegregation into a certain framework. It is therefore important to bring back and recall these international commitments of public authorities. The monitoring bodies of the Council of Europe provide an additional set of guidance through their regular monitoring cycles and assessment of national level compliance of policy and legal frameworks. In this respect, it's important to bring to the attention few but not only monitoring entities which have a concern and they look into closely the Roma inclusion aspect and the inclusive education aspect, such as the European Commission Against Racism Intolerance, or ECRI, the Advisory Committee on the Framework Convention for Protection of Minorities, or the European Charter for Regional and Minority Languages. They all provide certain aspects of, and they assess certain aspects of the national level compliance with the international standards, and therefore it is important for in the implementation of such recommendations. It's important to call upon this recommendation by the monitoring body because they may, in certain instances, be very specific. To provide perhaps an example, monitoring bodies, for example, ECRI goes a little bit deeper in the assessment of the educational policies and how they react or how they enable or disable exclusion among vulnerable groups, and therefore they provide very, very specific suggestions in what member states should further adapt in terms of policy and legal aspect, and that's why I'd like to bring to the attention of our audience and colleagues the importance of looking into these monitoring reports and recommendations. Because they provide a very focused and thematic guidance. Now, another interesting and quite helpful suggestions or guidance is the European Court of Human Rights, which has found several member states, including the Czech Republic, Croatia, and Greece, on two instances in particularly, in violation to the articles of the European Convention, namely in regards to access to education. What is interesting is that all the cases related to Roma in education ruled by the court are based on the authorities' discriminatory placement of Roma children in special schools for Roma children with intellectual disabilities or Roma-only classes. Another format of segregation is special preparatory classes or the enrollment of Roma children exclusively in certain schools. Now, given that at the moment there are few member states that are making policy and legal initiatives to put segregation or desegregation into a framework, the case law of the European Court can further help in understanding the interpretation of the court on how and what they consider as segregation and discriminatory practices in education. In addition to the already existing instruments and policy guidance on quality education for Roma children, we would like to take this opportunity to inform you also that the Committee of Experts of Roma and Travelers Issues of the Council of Europe is instructed to initiate a process for developing a feasibility study for a possible draft Committee of Ministers recommendation on desegregation and inclusion policies and practices in the field of education and Roma and travelers. Once the process is initiated by the Secretariat, it will be beneficial to make use of your expertise, know-how, and understanding of what works and what not in the field of segregation for the purpose of this feasibility study, but also for the purpose of a possible CM recommendation. This work is expected to be a longer working process, which may be initiated either later this year or early next year. Another important element of the work of the Council of Europe, in addition to the standard setting and monitoring, are the cooperation project. And one very specific cooperation project is the in-school project, which is supported by the European Commission and the Council of Europe. The purpose of the current cycle, in-school was initiated in 2017, and the purpose of the current cycle is slightly modified and adapted, and we aim to support the process of design and implementation of national inclusive education strategies and to promote inclusive education practices in line with the European standard and the principles of quality inclusive education. Now, to go a little bit more practical on what is the approach of the in-school project, because as a specific objective of the project is dedicated to ensuring evidence-based solutions, promoting changes in education policy and practice, and with the intention of preventing segregation. Now, the approach taken by the project is based on the principle of partnership and cooperation with national authorities in supporting them through the process of policy reform and adaptation. Now, the strategic approach that we have taken with this project, with these specific objectives in addressing segregation, is based on several components which have been already articulated in today's event and several occasions and quite in detail, such as data collection. The colleagues had from the previous panel have done an amazing work in assessing the levels, the impacts, and the dimension of segregation. So the idea is to further understand the prevalence of segregation in the education system. Another aspect which we have taken is the innovation in education, practice or in pedagogy. This is something which has not been addressed perhaps sufficiently in our debates, but it is important for us to accumulate or to explore educational methodologies and practices which have tangible impact either in terms of quality, increasing the quality of education, or in the process of inclusiveness of the education system. Therefore, we will be working in generating information, collecting data, and exchanging, with the idea that we would also like to know what are the pedagogic methodologies which can support the process of segregation, or mainly not segregation, but increasing the quality of education in segregated communities and the process of desegregation. There's another aspect which was already mentioned in the event.
Dennis, if you may finish in 1 minute, please, because we need to leave the room.
Absolutely.
Sorry for that.
Give me just two points to perhaps finish. Is the coalition building and learning? I think it was very much addressed that in the panel that a lot of the work is done that needs to be done to address segregation will require multi-stakeholders approach, coordination, and support. And therefore, we are looking forward in building this type of coalitions and learning among the different national entities which are relevant on education, including the public authorities, in order to raise our competences and understanding to address and adequately create solution on desegregation. I haven't been able to talk about a very interesting methodology and very useful, so I'm just going to mention it, that in the past cycles of implementation, we have been using the Index for Inclusion, which is a guide for school development led by inclusive values. This is a very flexible tool that allows schools to advance on their own pace, define their own priorities based on set of inclusive values. And this methodology is consisted of set of indicators of inclusion structured in several dimensions like development of cultures, policy, and practices. It's a very useful tool which provides schools to deeper reflect of what type of inclusive values they would like to promote in the school environment and among the school actors. Now, there are a few more elements which are important, but perhaps I'm not going to go further. I just wanted to perhaps highlight this because we are quite a bit of out of time. I just like to mention that we, at the moment, we have just initiated the third cycle of the implementation, and we are at the moment working towards promoting and establishing these elaborated approaches at the country level. And we look forward to engaging with all of you along the process and to build up together a more sustainable approach in the segregation and for the purpose of quality and inclusive education for Romani children. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Sorry for the time limitation. And thank you for sharing all the work that the Council of Europe is actually doing in this issue. Thank you for reminding that maybe we should remind member states of their international commitments regarding non-segregation, and of course the need for exchange of mutual learning on those practices that will start functioning, on those methodologies that will actually start giving some results as we move on. So I don't know if someone has a question that cannot refrain from doing it. Yes and no, okay. Okay, if not, I will just give the floor now to Isabela Michalache to conclude the meeting. And I'm very happy to see this issue also at the Roma Week. I think this is an issue that we will still need to keep on fighting for. So I hope to see you there in the coming occasions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Belen, and thank you all for your patience and also for the contributions from the speakers of all the panels. I think it was an amazing event. I think it was an amazing political momentum where we discussed the issue of segregation in education with very concrete work that has been done at national level, with concrete data that was collected by our previous speakers at national level in Spain, by the Secretariat of Fundación Gitano. So thank you, Belen and Carolina, and Rafael for the amazing work that you are doing. By our colleagues from Amalipe, Teodora, and Dejan who are here, thank you so much for your amazing work for the last 20 years, as you have mentioned. To CADO and the colleagues from CADO, if you can give them an applause for their amazing work because they're here. Really, thank you for making it to Brussels in a rainy day today, that's true, but we made it. Thank you also to the colleagues from the Council of Europe. One is present here with us today in person, and one was present with us online, Denis Durmish. It's an important work that the Council is doing as a standard-setting organization. The amazing also decisions by the European Court of Human Rights, actually 6 in total on cases of education, segregation education. Also, the colleagues from the European Commission, from the different departments, thank you so much for making the time to come here for your work. And so, as to conclude, it has been already said by all of you that when we talk about the challenges and the step forward at the same time, it's so important to have the right framework. At the European level, when it comes to the legal framework, the framework that we have, for instance, the Race Equality Directive it's now, as you know, referring in specifics to Roma, and so Here, the Romeo France, the MEP, is not here. He is claiming for a particular directive on anti-gypsyism and hopefully something very clear on segregation as well. This is still under consideration to what extent a particular EU law on Roma would actually help to put forward the agenda on the human rights perspective. But what we have now, it needs more monitoring and work from our colleagues from the European Commission to make sure that the EU law is actually implemented. We talked about the importance of having inclusive policies at both European and national level. We have to date at European level a quite comprehensive EU policies, both on Roma issues, also on social inclusion, and also on a rights-based perspective with the EU Action Plan against racism. So all should work very well together with the funding programming period to make sure that at the level of the member states, countries have all the tools to basically make steps forward. The Fundamental Rights Agency, Andrei Ivanov, who I named again, Ivan Ivanov, I apologize to him. He spoke about the importance of having conditionalities on funding also at national level and more so at local and regional, municipal level, so that things can actually move forward. We talked about the importance of data, and the NGOs that presented their work here today worked so much on trying to map out segregation. But it's not their duty, it's the duty of the member states to do this type of work. And so I was very pleased to hear from our friends from the FSG that the government has commissioned them to actually do this type of work. It's not, I understood, on a national level, but more needs to be done by the governments to have this mapping at national level on the actual segregation education of children in education that would give them, with a very clear guidelines, that would give them the possibility to actually move forward. And we'd also talked about the awareness. I don't know how many of you knew of all the countries that still have segregation in their countries at national level. When we look at Belgium, we would say they don't have. When we look at France, we would say they don't have, because maybe it's not so apparent. But as we have named these countries at the beginning of the introduction of my presentation, you would see that a lot of these countries across the member states, whether in the Western countries, whether in Central and European countries, segregation is present in one way or another. And so what needs to happen actually is to put everything together, all the synergies, both at the level of legal framework, policies, data, and continue the amazing work that it's done. And I would say also, as a civil society representative, more funding to NGOs. As you know, segregation education is not such a fancy topic. Not a lot of the NGOs have the possibility and the means to work on the topic, even if they wish to. So this is my call to the European institutions to support or to find new ways, and hopefully in the next phase of the EU funding, to make it the guidelines even simpler for NGOs to be able to get funding and to focus on segregation in education, whether through the direct funding, underserved, or shared management funding. All needs to be even more simpler for the NGOs that are present here today to be able to address this issue. And lastly, I would like to thank all of you for your amazing work. I would like to thank our audience, because this is also online audience, because this has also been streamlined for the past 4 days. I hope that this event today and all the other events over the past 4 days have raised some awareness on important key issues and concerns that Roma communities are experiencing, that civil communities are fighting with, that all the stakeholders are trying to address in a joint effort to move towards Roma equality, inclusion, and participation. Thank you also to our amazing interpreters and the work that have been doing, also to the IT team that is present here with us today, and to all those that have contributed. And of course, a last thanks also to Romeo France MEP, to Marius Tudor, who is here present with us, for the work and the coordination for the entire Roma Week. Thank you all, and God bless you. Have a safe trip back home. Thank you.
we will have one last event that will close the Romani week. It's about capacity building on Romani helped by IFA, but this is an online event. If you would like to stay, you are more than welcome to stay. Okay? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. If you could please take your seats, we're about to start. Hello, can you hear me? Could everybody please take their seats? We're about to start the event.
Excuse me, can we start with the workshop? Thank you.
Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. I am Thomas de Jong. I'm a policy assistant for the European Public Health Alliance. I represent the Roma Health Network there. And I'd really like to welcome you at this capacity building event for Roma health equity. If we can go to the first slide, please. So I hope that you've really enjoyed the previous events today during the 2022 Romani week. And I'm very grateful as well that some of you have decided to join ours as well. So just to briefly introduce you to the Roma Health Network, our network consists of a number of different actors from different levels of society, from the grassroots level, but also some actors from such as researchers and advocates from the national and international level. And together we focus on the social determinants of health. This is really what we try to focus on. And by highlighting these social determinants of health, we address some of the issues that Roma face regarding their health standards. This takes many forms, as you may imagine. And today we want to highlight one of these particular forms. So, as most of you might know already, anti-Gypsyism manifests itself in health inequalities between Roma and non-Roma. And this can take many forms. It may reach from lower health insurance coverage, which is a simple thing, but it may also include discrimination in healthcare. And one of the worst things that we can talk about is an overall lower average life expectancy. In some cases, there are countries where Roma have a life expectancy 10 years lower than the average. Now, based on these facts, back in March, the Roma Health Network expanded on some of these issues in recommendations that we did for the national Roma integration strategies that we have offered to the Directorate General for Justice and Consumers. And I'd really recommend you to read them. So today we want to highlight one particular topic, which has gained a lot of attention since COVID-19 and also with the recent war in Ukraine. This is really quite a crucial aspect which is often overlooked in health and well-being, and that topic is mental health. I would like to point out as well that this week is the European Mental Health Week, or last week was the European Mental Health Week, and this week is the European Public Health Week. And as coincidence would have it, today is No Health Without Mental Health Day. And this really highlights the importance of the topic. But despite this fact, mental health often is still underrepresented in health, particularly in Roma health. Roma are often disproportionately targeted by mental stress, particularly because of the effects of anti-Gypsyism. And precisely because of this topic, I am very glad today to be joined by my colleagues from the Roma Health Network. So next to me, for example, here you have Zoran Bejkovski. He represents NGO Camp del Chevo from North Macedonia. They're a grassroots NGO. Aside from that, we have two colleagues from Spain. We have Daniela E. Miranda from the Center of Community Research and Action, which we will refer to as CESPIT for short, from the University of Sevilla in Spain. And joining her is Belén Sotoponce. They're both researchers. And then we have Borjan Pavlovski from the Association for Emancipation, Solidarity and Equality for Women, which we call ESE for short. Which is something that's not on the agenda, but a later addition to this event is we have Olga Theodorikakou joining us from the Klimaka Roma Day Center from Greece, who will briefly speak about their work on mental health. And then lastly, we have Jacopo Villani, who works for the Irish Health Service Executive. And he will be talking about mental health among travelers in Ireland. Now, I will not spend too much time about what we're going to talk about today. I'd rather get straight to the topics. Suffice it to say, we're going to be talking about the mental health model today. A mental health model that was designed by CESPIT and was then later applied in North Macedonia by my colleagues who will be talking about that today. This is really to highlight one of the most important things in our work. It's capacity building. We try to really build capacity among some civil society at the grassroots level. That's where most of the action takes place. So this is what we will be talking about in the content of today's meeting. However, after it's over, we will also have a brief intervention from Borjan, who I already introduced earlier, who will be talking about the COPASA network, but he will be talking about that later. If you have any questions, this also refers to the people who are joining us online. I would ask you to write them down, save them for the end of the event where we will be addressing them. We will take sufficient time for that because that's really one of the main things that we wanted to take away today. So with that said, without further ado, I'd like to pass the floor on to Daniela and Belen, who will be joining us online. So I don't know if we have them connected now. Okay, I see Belen.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, and Daniela. Okay, perfect. The floor is yours. Go ahead.
Okay, so good afternoon. My name is Belen Soto Ponce. As Thomas said, I'm from the Center of Community Research and Action at the University of Sevilla. And together with my colleague Daniela Miranda, presenting a mental health model towards Romani health equity. This is a model we developed recently jointly with the Open Society Foundations. So, next slide, please. Okay, so to begin with, we wanted to raise the following question: does Romani mental health matter? Surprisingly, usually mental health or mental well-being are not even mentioned within the different Romani strategic frameworks developed throughout Europe. And nevertheless, these strategies do incorporate different priorities focused on fighting anti-Gypsyism, such as reducing poverty, promoting participation, or improving the access to quality services. All these issues have direct effects on Romani communities' mental health. Therefore, adopting this vision can help us to strive for the promotion of mental health among these communities, while at the same time can allow us to fight against Romani inequities and encourages us to protect human rights. So, next slide, please. Okay, then to achieve this, it is essential to move from a medical approach to Romani mental health to a biopsychosocial approach. A medical approach usually entails binary categories to diagnosis and is mostly focused on individual level processes as well as biological characteristics. However, we found different evidences suggesting that there are different chronic and persistent stressors that can lead also to mental health challenges. But these stressors, which can be, for example, marginalization or discrimination that Romani communities suffer in a daily basis, these stressors are merely considered when addressing mental health issues within this population. So, a medical approach, we consider that it's obviously necessary to address Romani mental health, but if we only focus on this approach, we will be only palliating the damages done by the unjust social conditions that Romani people live. So, adopting a biopsychosocial approach can help us to understand that well-being, apart from individual and biological processes, depends also on political, social, and economic circumstances, which can help us to keep in mind the protection of human rights. So again, and just to conclude with this slide, as the rapporteur of the Human Rights Council stated, there can be no good mental health without human rights, which again highlights the need to move forward a human rights-based approach to Romani mental health. So, next slide, please. Okay, following this logic, we develop a non-medical approach to mental health, as you can see in the picture. So within this model, just to clarify, there you can see the definitions that we used to mental distress and to mental well-being. We consider mental distress as the disturbances of thought, emotion, behavior, and relationships with others that lead to suffering and the functional impairment in one or more major life activities, while on the other hand, we defined mental well-being as a state of well-being in which the individual can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively, and is able to contribute to their communities. So going in depth with the model, as you can see, at the center are the civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights. And essentially, what we found was that the violation of all these human rights is understood as the direct cause of Romani experiences of mental distress. So there are different levels mediating this relationship. And if you click on the slide, please. Okay. So at the structural level, through structural discrimination, at the interpersonal level through the exclusion from social spheres, and at the individual level through transmitted trauma and interiorized discrimination. Also, on the other hand, this approach also explains how Romani people can develop strengths and resources to cope with all these situations, and how Romani mental and psychological well-being can be promoted through the protection of those human rights. So, can you click on the slide, please? Okay, then again, there are three interdependent levels of this relationship: at the individual level through building critical awareness and strength, at the interpersonal level through building networks and capacity to respond, and at the structural level through developing transformative multi-level changes. So in the next slides, I will go more in depth in the dimension that these three levels entail towards Romani mental distress and towards Romani mental well-being. So this is just to contextualize that to develop this mental health model, we collaborated in an initiative with the Open Society Foundations, as I said at the beginning, which was aimed at proposing a framework to explore non-medical approaches to mental health, and which was also aimed at providing an analysis to guide the future initiatives. So to achieve this, we included the collaboration of different key stakeholders and key experts from different contexts in Europe, specifically in Ukraine, Italy, Germany, and Czech Republic. So through these collaborations, the effects of the social determinants, discrimination, or transmitted trauma on Romani mental health were explored and analyzed throughout the different contexts, and were the basis of the model that we developed and that I presented earlier. So now I'm going to go more in depth on how those different interdependent levels mentioned previously can determine Romani mental health, provoking Romani mental distress or mental well-being. So next slide, please. Okay, so can you click again, please? Okay, so there you will see the definitions for each levels and the dimensions that are included for each of those levels that I mentioned previously. So to sum up, for the first, for the mental distress dimension at the structural level, discrimination or anti-Gypsyism causes violent treatments from institutions and society against Romani communities, which deeply deteriorates their mental health state. So this includes also the neighborhood characteristics in which Romani people live, the barriers to access to services, the barriers to scale for the education system, the unfair and substandard living and housing conditions, etc. So, can you click again? Okay, now we have the relational level. We understand that this anti-Gypsyism and structural discrimination also leads to the exclusion from social spheres, for example, by being pushed to live in precarious conditions, or by preventing Romani communities from fully participating in social and decision-making processes in different fields, for example, political, economic, or the social field. So all of these processes also, can you click on the slide, please? Okay, this process also leads to the internalization of the previous oppression, and is what causes mental distress among these populations, for example, causing feelings of self-blame, victimization, feelings of worthlessness, a low self-esteem, etc. And all these feelings can be transmitted from one generation to the other and can damage these Romani communities for generations. So, next slide, please. Okay, now on the dimension of mental well-being, this model I presented also explains how Romani people can develop those strengths and those resources to cope with the previous situations. Firstly, at the individual level, through the development of critical thinking, Romani communities can build strengths, and what is most important is that they can start to believe that the conditions they live in can actually change. So then, at the interpersonal level, mental health is also associated with building new social networks and ties that can increase Romani communities' capacities to respond to injustice, for example, by identifying support and allies through community organizing, for example. Okay, and finally, this process can also lead to the involvement of Romani communities in transformative multi-level changes, which can include taking collective action towards change, which also entails the meaningful influence and meaningful participation of Romani communities during all these processes. So now I will leave the who will explain the implications of this mental health model and how can we apply it through different contexts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Belén, and also thank you to Tomás and Efa and our colleagues from North Macedonia. I'm going to explain a little bit of how we can translate this human rights-based framework into a practical model and some key takeaways for organizations, but also for researchers and policymakers, and the way that we worked in developing a series of questions and how we developed those questions into modules for capacity building with our colleagues, Borjan and Zoran. Well, with the consortia, with the people that we had developed this model with, we asked ourselves a series of questions that have accompanied us until today to make sure that we're promoting a human rights-based framework based on all those multi-levels that Belén had mentioned previously. And one of the first questions we ask ourselves is, how can we develop research approaches that are free of violence? So within organizations, partnering with researchers or doing evaluations of programs, how can we make sure that those programs and those processes are free of violence. And we address that. It's a recognition of the power imbalances. It's a recognition of the cultural domination that can come from biomedical approaches to mental health and the different types of whiteness and entitlements that we've seen in academia and evaluation processes. And so we really want to strengthen what we understand as expert knowledge and understand that Romani partners and community are co-researchers in this process, and that it's important to transfer that knowledge back to the community and provide that recognition. The second question we asked ourselves is, how can Romani adopt a community development and organizing approach? So how can we promote Roma mental health in programs that also incorporate an organizing and development approach? And what we mean by this is how to increase power and share experiences between different users and community members to gain a social support and a network to increase power and develop community knowledge. And this is very tied as well to how can we expand our conceptualization of trauma, the third question, because through trauma and talking about the different experiences and sharing those experiences, we can use that information as evidence to advocate and organize together to support Romani living conditions which affect mental health as well. And finally, how can we address discrimination at multiple levels? Well, this means raising awareness in different settings, which allows us to also gain alliances to advocate for Romani communities. And as the earlier speaker had said, ensuring accountability of discrimination as well, and building local coalitions that can bridge these different levels together and ensure that Romani mental health is included in different agendas at the local level and at the national level and at the European level. Next slide, please. And so through these, if you can click as well, through these different questions, we developed a capacity building practice together with our colleagues from North Macedonia. So how could we take this model and these questions and transfer it and contextualize it to build critical knowledge about Romani mental health and develop action plans at the local level to address multiple levels of discrimination that were impeding Romani mental health. So we developed a capacity building session with 3 main modules and objectives. The first is to raise awareness on Roma mental health from a human rights-based approach model. So really discussing, identifying, and analyzing what the local issues are and what those local issues, identifying them and prioritizing them. And a second module where we share different community-based participatory tools to engage users of services, but also community organization managers and animators and mediators to find allies and identify those different issues and share those experiences to finally take that information and turn it into an advocacy model, an action plan that could then be committed by the different, to build commitment between different organizations, researchers at the local level to take actions on different priorities to address Romani mental health. And so now I would like to pass it on to our colleagues from North Macedonia to share their experience of implementing a human rights-based model in practice. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Daniela. Thank you, Belen. That was an excellent presentation. One of the things that I think is really quite crucial and quite interesting about this mental health model is that even though we're talking about a mental health model, we're not just talking about mental health. What your presentation very effectively points out is that all the effects of anti-Gypsyism in some way influence mental health as well, and this just really reinforces this concept where there's just a connect between all of these sectoral effects of anti-Gypsyism. And then, of course, another thing that is that I really like about your mental health model is that then also it's also applicable. We can actually use the work that you've done to drive change. We can turn it into action. And so in order to kind of to make the next step, to make that next step to a practicality, we're going to move now to our colleague Borjan Pavlovsky from ESE. Now, I was told that Borjan unfortunately does not have video capabilities currently, so we will only be able to hear his voice. But if you would move to the next slide, please, and then if we can get Borjan to join us to do his presentation. Borjan, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Thomas. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation for this event. My name is Borjan Pavlovski from Association ESE from North Macedonia. I will briefly speak about how we, with the help of our colleague from CESPIT from the University of Sevilla, we adopted the human rights-based approach to addressing mental health of Roma in Macedonia, and all of this work is initiated last year, and we are still in the phase of planning and development. Still, I would like to just show you how we just implemented this theoretical approach into our work. Next slide, please. Very briefly regarding the situation about mental health in North Macedonia, we have huge discrepancies between the legislation and the reality, since although we have a specific law on mental health which was adopted in 2006 even, still in 2017 we have a lack of mental health workforce, and we have one of the lowest level of mental health workforce per 100,000 people. It's only 19.7 of total mental health workforce in the country, and just 0.5 child psychiatrists per 100,000 in North Macedonia. So this is one of the lowest levels in Europe. And we don't have data about annual visits for mental health facilities, so we really do not know about how much our population is utilizing the health services in general. So what is the real current need? But one data which is very indicative is that for years, or for 5 years or more, the most prescribed drug in the country is the benzodiazepines, are the most prescribed drugs in the country, which obviously shows that we have quite of a need of addressing the mental health in the country overall. Next slide, please. About the mental health of Roma, it was never addressed in the past, neither in the strategy for Roma, neither in the action plan for health for Roma. The mental health for Roma was never tackled. No governmental institution or NGO did any research or brought out data about the status of the mental health of the Roma minority in North Macedonia. Roma minority in North Macedonia represents around 3% of the population and is most deprived and marginalized group of the population, as in many other European countries as well. Because there was a lack of data for mental health of Roma, Association ESE, in cooperation with the Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg School of Public Health, we have conducted a community-based survey in Roma communities in 2017. And through this survey, we have detected that 45% of Romas suffer from mild depression and 34% of Roma suffer from severe depression, which are really worrisome figures. And this clearly showed to us that we must expand our work in order to address the mental health of Roma. That is why we have established a cooperation with CESPIT, with Daniela, Belen, and Manuel. And next slide, please. And they have prepared last year, in 2021, they have prepared a training package for ESE and other Roma grassroots-based organizations, 5 more Roma civil society organizations, in order to strengthen our capacities to work on mental health for Roma through their approach, through the human rights-based approach on addressing mental health for Roma. This training enabled us to understand this concept of non-medical approach to mental health, but also enabled us to understand that we as a civil society organizations can address the determinants, the social determinants which influence mental health of Roma. The training enabled us to see that there are many social determinants influencing mental health of Roma, as Belen and Daniel already spoke, which can be addressed through our work. That there is no need of specific education in psychiatry or psychology, but through our work we can tackle these social determinants which have negative impact on the mental health of Roma through our work in the Roma communities themselves. The next slide, please. Through this training also we have developed action plans. Each Roma CSO developed action plans with the help from our colleagues from Spain and with assistance from our association ESA. Each Roma CSO prepared a specific action plan in this regard. So these are some examples how we took the theoretical model and put it in practice. We understood, one NGO understood that early childhood development is really important for the mental health and well-being of Roma throughout the life course. Because although it's a basic human right and child right to have proper early childhood development, which enable individuals to survive and thrive throughout life. In the same time, in North Macedonia, there is a very, very small proportion of Roma children attending preschool education. Many factors are influencing this issue. One is a lack of awareness among Roma parents, but also lack of finances and discrimination as well. So that's why, as you can see in the table, we have planned several actions in order to advocate for free transport for Roma children to kindergartens, in order to reduce the financial gaps. We have planned educational workshops for Roma parents in order to raise their awareness for the need of enrolling the children in the kindergarten and for the importance. And we strive to identify the problems and find solutions together with Roma parents. Which are all the problems and the barriers which do not allow Roma parents to enroll the children in their kindergarten? So all of these actions are tackling the different layers which were explained by Belen and Daniela, from the transformative multi-level changes to building networks and capacity to respond to the problem and raising critical awareness and strengths. Next slide, please. The other Roma CSO identified that the barriers for Roma to access social services in the community of Shuto Rizari is a real has big impact on the mental health of Roma in their municipality. You can see the picture. This is the Center for Social Services in the municipality of Shuto Rizari, which has around 30,000 Roma, and there are only 2 people, officers, clerks, which are providing assistance. And this is an everyday picture with people struggling to access these services, and many Roma people are using some kind of social services. So this really, and even this picture taken during the COVID pandemic, where the people are, besides the measures for COVID, they must enter in this old and narrow building to obtain their social rights and social services. So this was also recognized as one poor social services were recognized as a impact that have a negative impact on the mental health of Roma. So this is why the one NGO decided to work on the sensitization of social workers, but also on employment of more social workers in the municipality in order for them to address the needs of Roma. And Roma sensitiveness to improve the communication and motivating Roma to search for employment opportunities and to be proactive with employment services in order to stimulate the Roma to advocate themselves for more social workers to be employed in this center. The next slide, please. Also, it was since this training was in 2021 in the winter, when the COVID pandemic was really striking in Europe and in North Macedonia as well. So one of the barriers which has negative impact on Roma health was access to health services on primary level in the period of COVID-19 pandemic, because the people had really big problem accessing the health services non-COVID related health services in that period, and especially this was a really big problem among Roma. So the NGO decided to address this issue in order to improve healthcare system, to improve conditions for delivery of services, to demand employment of more doctors and nurses on the primary level to address the needs of the people, but also to increase the economic power of poor Roma families, which were immensely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, and they were impoverished even more. So all of these aspects were addressed through their action plan in order to improve the access to healthcare services and health of Roma people in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide, please. And also improved family planning and education on the parenting was identified by another Roma CSO as a crucial point to tackle and to improve the mental health of Roma, because it was recognized that unwanted pregnancies among Roma, underage pregnancies as well, has serious negative impact on the mental health of Roma. Also, these unwanted pregnancies resulting in families with many children which live in poverty, even more impacts the mental health of Roma parents, but also Roma children as well. That's why they have decided to focus the education of Roma people on family planning, but also education on positive parenting, again to improve the early childhood development of Roma. Next, please. Yeah, and that is the end of presentation. So this was very briefly how the human rights-based approach or non-medical approach for addressing mental health of Roma was applied in the action plans, and we are still working. Now we are conducting research on this issue, so this work is still in development. Thank you very much for your attention.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Borjan. Again, a great presentation. And I think one of the nice things about this, and this is also obviously how we structured this event today, it takes us another step down from that top level now to the national level. One of the things that I found quite interesting when you were talking during your presentation, for example, that you actually took the effort of collecting your own data, which was also something that was mentioned today. The lack of data oftentimes prevents us from taking action. But on the other hand, what you talked about today, with all these examples about the previous one, for example, about children, to name one, is that health inequalities often do not exist in a vacuum. They are always, and this counts also for the mental health subject that we're talking about today. They are always interconnected with the other sectoral effect of anti-Gypsyism. This is something that I said in the previous presentation, but I want to repeat it here again, because that's really one of the main things that we want to talk about today. So thank you very much, Borjan, for giving us that insight. Now that we've talked about the national level, we are going to move to the local level. So Zoran Bikovsky here next to me from NGO Camp Delchevo will be talking about his work with a grassroots NGO, really with the Roma community itself. So we're really going to be seeing how this mental health model has been applied in the field. So Zoran, without further ado, take the floor, please.
Thank you, Thomas. We speak about very important thing, very important topic. So I will do combination between what my colleagues from Spain says and my colleague Borjan from Macedonia says, how is possible to working on the mental health or to improve condition of the Roma community on the local level. I will present one small presentation what we do on the field. Next slide, please. First, I will start with this. Who are we like NGO? How did we have credibility and legitimacy? Did the real Roma community need mental health? Next slide. So I will start with this, that NGO CAM exists since 1999. They have, or NGO CAM have implemented more than 80 projects. NGO CAM united 120 members and 12 people who work directly in the office, directly with the community who visit our office, and also activists who go in direct field and work with the community. So that means 20 years experience mean that Roma community recognize us like close leaders, etc. And also institutions on the local and regional level recognize like possible or real partners on the field. That means that give us credibility and legitimacy. When we speak about the mental health, can we move to the next slide? Can we move? Okay, thank you. When we speak about the mental health, we must be honest. These last 2 years was disaster for all countries, especially for Macedonia, and the most marginal group in Macedonia or ethnicity was the Roma community. What that mean? That mean a lack of accessibility to the health institutions, a lack of transportation, losing of job placement, a lot of people who die or was sickness or everywhere was stress, isolation, quarantine, reducing of movement, fear, disinformation. We need vaccine, we don't need vaccine. In that condition, one community who is most marginal, who is with the smallest level of education, why I say this? Our effort is not to support Roma community or Roma people who have education, access to job placement, etc., etc. They are on equal level like majority in Macedonia. Our idea, our topic is to support people who living in the margin, who didn't have information, who didn't have enough job placement. And from this reason, I says, yes, we need that kind of action and support what NGO ESE and NGO from Spain give us was very valuable. That's help us first together with the Roma leaders to do selection of priority. What kind of priority? Priority, what we will be addressed on the first, on systematic level. That means to be issue what is systematic and need action what is related with institution. On that way, we selected 3 priorities. One is raising awareness among Roma parents about the importance of preschool education. Second was reducing the barrier between institution and the Roma community. And third was improving access to health servicing during the COVID-19. What was the challenge in the first priority, preschool education? It's not just to be informed. Our job is to empower community to know their rights. Can we move to the next slide, Justin? Yes. First, people must understand the law exists for them. Second, people must believe that they have a power to do the changes. And third, together with us, because we speak about very confusion period, when you demand something from institution, you are not sure that will be a return. In that case, we created action plan, how to address the issue, how to get the information, how much places in the kindergarten exist for the Roma children, covered from Ministry of the Labor and Social Affairs. On that way, we created during the steps, what is the problem, what is the reason for the problem, what is the consequence from the problem, what kind of goals to put, who will be our allies, who will be our opponents. Did we have enough argument to prove what we says and what kind of activities we will take? Next. From this reason, we first selected the authorities from institution who are responsible to answer to all of our questions and also to find, our idea was to find what is their motive to participate. That means we call them with their professionals, we stimulate to be the leaders in their work, and of course to be respected from community on local level and also in their majority community. When we speak about how to motivate the leaders from the Roma community, they want to maintain position of leaders and they want to do also career and to be, and also they are sensible about the condition of Roma because they are a Roma. Next slide, please. On that way, we created informal body, and where we speak about the real challenges and presented what is the status or statement from the community. So community says, when we going to the kindergarten, teacher says, are you assured that your children want to come here? It's a COVID. Maybe it will be danger for your fathers and mothers, older people. Are not sure that it's covered from the Ministry of Labor. We need much more time, and on that way they relativize. But we need the arguments, and also to ask, demand from somebody responsibility. What we do in that case, we empower the community. So that means first to communicate with the responsible people and from institution, and from second, we to empower the leader of community and to empower the same community. Next slide. So, what was our idea? People to teach the law, to understand the law, and to shape the law. They understand that they have right of the law, and the law exists for them the same like all peoples. So, we empower community in that way. We do the door-to-door visits to speak with everybody who is influenced with this, to deliver education material, to read that, yes, I have right. We put posters on the public places, and we organize also workshops together with the people of institution who will confirm that, yes, this is your right. Next slide. So we organize the survey, we organize the focus groups, so that on that way we collect all arguments, what is necessary to prove that we can that's happened on the field. And also we send it and we teach the community that they have right of the request of information for public character, and on that way to be informed what is the truth. Next slide. So we created advocacy plan. We organized the meetings with decision makers, also with the arguments. During these meetings we organized a campaign through the internet and on TV, and we involved the Roma leaders in all segments on this advocacy plan. So that means they was together with us when we collect the ideas and information, and also they are with us when they present their idea and information. Next slide. This is one of example, if somebody wants to see, I believe through the internet it's possible, how we organize this education about, for example, for health rights. That means right to going to the gynecologist checkup, right to go to the specialist, to go to internist, to know that for the social beneficiaries, they are not responsible to pay any social participation and health participation. This is the example of everything organized, and it's important for community, you will collect the community. Next slide, please. Dealing with the fake news, we also try to the community to explain that not any information what you take from maybe from social media or from some ordinary people or maybe some political leader is true. How to recognize the fake news, how to check the truth of the information. Did the vaccination is wrong? We explain to the community how to find what is the real news. We explain to the community that according WHO or World Health Organization, immunization is the best way to protect from the disease. We didn't guarantee about vaccine, but we informed them that WHO, what is the most relevant factor on this planet, guarantee, not we. Who are we to guarantee? On that way, we try to explain to the community, it's very important to be informed about your rights, and you have right to demand your rights. We do the same with some of the health issue and the social issue. And on that way, we do a lot of changes. Next slide, please. A result of this is we not just to put the same numbers like before, about the Roma children who are going to preschool. We raised for 60% because with information of public character, we are informed that we didn't use enough possibilities to be children to going there. We increased the number of the social right beneficiaries and people who find the job, what is very important. That means we educated about the governmental degree. 1 month if you didn't have income of your social account, you have right of guaranteed minimum income. Or what is the active measures to find the job. On that way we improved this. It didn't was easy because it's a lot of stigma. Don't go to the Center of Social Affairs. We will inform you when to come. People, we inform that we must accept the reality, to respect the rules to protection of the COVID-19 and to asking to demand the better life, right-based approach of the rights, not to somebody to give us something what not belong. And also in that way, when the leaders of the Roma community and health institutions and other responsible institutions speak together, we empower first trust between them, and also we empower the common life in our place. Next slide. Challenges about, again, sometimes we have information who coming from official people, official person, they created disinformation. From this reason, we says every time to check what is official. We have, for last year, information from Prime Minister who coming together with one Roma NGO on TV says, we will invest 2.5 million euros for employment of Roma. And people waiting, where is the money? So yes, somebody can express some idea, but you must to check when there will be like official governmental decree. Second is high degree of motivation of Roma leaders because of inflation and because everything what's happened with energy and Ukraine crisis. It's a reducing of the money who coming to the grassroots organization and also to have chance to connect it with the Roma leaders. And third is political influence. Then a lot of NGOs, Roma, is very connected with political parties, so we didn't know did they are movement, did they are NGOs, did they are grassroots, or did they are political party. Next slide. Thank you, and I hope we can show now the video, one small video. With this video, we again will present how we mobilize community and we use, in some cases, and religion in the process of the healthing.
Патниците, болните, трудниците и дојлките се ослободени од постот, со тоа што после Рамазан мора да ги надополнат деновите што ги пропуштиле. Постот на жените кои се во месечен циклус и постнатално крварење не е исправен, па пропуштените денови поради нивната состојба мора да ги надополнат после Рамазан. Врските што се засноваат на побожноста и доброчинството се најсилните врски и токму тие врски се најпотребни за човештвото. Што се однесува до духовната и психолошката димензија на постот, тој помага во трпеливост, упорност, решителност и помага на личноста да ја зголеми самоконтролата, да ја зголеми саморефлективноста, односно желбата подлабоко да ја запознае својата внатрешна природа. Постот исто така помага во промена на однесувањето, односно навиките, што е секако една од најтешките задачи. Личноста станува свесна за лошото однесување и се бори само против себе да ги промени лошите навики. На прашањето дали може да се оди на лекар во текот на постот, лекарските прегледи сами по себе не го анулираат постот, освен ако самиот преглед не подразбира внесување на течности или храна и слично, директно во дигестивниот систем по пат на консумирање или инјектирање на лек кој е хранлив или кој доспева директно до централниот нервен систем. Лабораториските прегледи, како што се земање крв поради крвна анализа, анализа на урина и столица, не го анулираат постот. Сепак, давањето крв во текот на постот не е пожелно. Подобро е да се одложи. Спроведувањето на ендоскопија, колоноскопија, ректален или вагинален ултразвук се врши со уреди кои после прегледот не остануваат во внатрешноста на телото. Тие прегледи, иако не подразбираат јадење и пиење, го поништуваат постот бидејќи навлегувањето на уредите главно е пропратено со вода или течности и слични супстанции. Одењето кај заболекар исто така не е проблем, но мора да се внимава додека се врши третманот да не се проголта нешто. Волтањето на крвта го анулира постот. Сепак, доколку не е хитно, подобро е да се одложи третманот после Рамазан. За крај, секогаш информирајте се на вистинските места од институциите кои се надлежни да ги даваат информациите. И истите одговараат и пред Аллах и пред луѓето. Точната информација може да значи живот, а од лажната има само штета.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Zoran, for this presentation and also the video to wrap it up with. Now, one of the main things that I think is important about Zoran's work is something that he talks about also in this presentation. Belen and Daniela talk about the human rights approach to mental health, and the work that Zoran does really embodies that. We talk about the empowerment of the community itself. We talk about providing the tools and the instruments for Roma to take their matters in their own hands and improve their standard of living and improve their mental health as a result. And now this video, I believe, gives us quite a nice illustration of a Roma man who talks about something specifically cultural to him, what it means to him, and how it improves his mental health in a way, and how it can also work for other people of the community. And I think that's one of the main things that we should take away from Zoran's presentation, really, that it's about the empowerment of the community itself, and that they can really make a change if they only have the instruments that they need. Now, I'm glad to say that we are perfectly on schedule, so we will move on now to the open floor discussion. But before we do that, we will move on to the speakers that came into our event a bit later. So the first person I would like to give the floor to is Olga, who will be speaking on behalf of Klimaka Day Center in Greece. And now they do quite a lot of work with also on mental health, also with Roma, but also with other groups, as I understand it. They also recently went to the Romanian-Ukrainian border and did work there with refugees. But I will not talk too much about that. I will just pass the floor on now to Olga, who will tell you all about it, I'm sure. So Olga, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Thomas. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Thomas, for this chance to briefly present our work with the Romani community. I hope that we have more time next time to be more descriptive. So, Klimaka is one of the largest mental health organizations in Greece, working on the front lines of providing mental health services and combating social exclusion for more than 25 years. We run currently 17 mental health units across Greece, and we develop and implement several projects for the promotion of mental health and the combat of social exclusion in Greece and abroad. Among the mental health units we run a mental health center for refugees and asylum seekers, a mental health center for the homeless. We also run the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, the Greek Center for Suicide Prevention, and, of course, a mental health center for Roma, for the Romani community. Our core beliefs and the way we work is we believe that we work for the formation of a world where solidarity and collective action combat the causes of exclusion. And this is the way we work also with the Romani community more than 25 years now, addressing not only mental health needs of the community and the members of it, but more specifically having a holistic and integrated approach. So we address also the social and environmental determinants of health that are responsible for health inequalities. So in our center, more than 15,000 Roma have received individualized services and they are registered to our private database. We have different kinds of services in our center. We have a reception center, a reception service, an education service, literacy programs for adults and children. We also run an employment service that facilitates the access to employment, to entrepreneurship, having a specific focus on social entrepreneurship. We have a women's support service, a health and mental health empowerment group, and we are now starting a new project, the Romama project, a project for young mothers. We also have, we provide services to offenders and their families in cooperation with the Ministry of Justice. And we also run the Roma Watch, recording projects, initiatives, good practices, bad practices, and thus with the Watch designing also our advocacy interventions. During the past few years of the COVID pandemic, we developed and implemented a response plan that included info and awareness campaigns for protection measures and vaccinations in the Romani language, informing people regarding all these activities, vaccination, disinfection, fake news, and things like that. We were in camps and settlements. We had leaflets and posters and different info material in the Romani language. And we also provided medical equipment to the community. In this, at the COVID-19 response plan, more than 10,000 Roma were informed and supported through this plan. I have to be brief, so I want to conclude. I just want to say that it's worth mentioning that Klimakas Roma Center is the only health social unit running steadily for so many years for the Romani community in Greece. There is no other unit, and I think this is an issue. And I would also like to say that more than 48 members of the community have worked and are still working, more of them, in Klimaka and at our social cooperative, Klimax Plus, after being trained as mental health caregivers, they themselves in residential care units that we run. And, you know, apart from the tailored work integration scheme that those colleagues of us have received, we have seen in practice how they and their families, their whole life path has changed. And moreover, and most importantly, maybe, those people serve as positive role models for their whole communities, multiplying the positive results for their lives into their micro-societies. To conclude, after more than 25 years' work with the Romani community, we know that no results can come from interventions designed from above without the participation of the community, interventions that are limited either to repression or temporary relief. I have given a special focus at the challenges mentioned from the colleague from North Macedonia, and they are the same. These are the same challenges that we also face. So, speaking for Greece, policies are doomed to remain a failure as long as they are designed in the direction of a passive assimilation procedure and not as a dynamic integrational approach that can form and give the opportunities for the community to climb over social and economic exclusion. I hope I didn't took a lot of your time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Olga. You only went slightly over time, so there's no problem at all. I'm really happy that you decided to join us after all. And one of the things that I think is very important to point out about, you talked about, and you pointed it out yourself as well, is that you face a lot of the same issues that Zoran also faces in North Macedonia. And I think that really underlines the topic that we're trying to tackle here, which is the social determinants of health, how they influence mental health, and how they influence the Roma standard of living in general. And so that's why I think it's really important that you also got to underline that today by speaking here. And I'm really happy to say that you're also part of our Roma Health Network. Now we will briefly move on to Jacopo Villani. He works for the Irish Health Service Executive, and he's a researcher and does a lot of work regarding mental health among travelers, Irish travelers. I hope he's joining us right now. I will pass the floor on to him now, and he will talk about some of his research.
Yes. Hi, Thomas. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for inviting me to this event. It is a privilege for me to participate in this event and describe and participate with and contribute with the experience of working with members of the traveling community here in Ireland. So my name is Jacopo Villani. I'm from Italy, but I work in Ireland, and I work in the health services. So I don't work in the NGO sector, but I work within the health services, and my post is mental health service coordinator for travelers. So travelers in Ireland are included together with the Roma in the National Travel and Roma Inclusion Strategies. So they're part of the same strategies. And my position, the mental health service coordinator for traveler position, is included in that strategy. So we work within the health services, the mental health services, to make sure that travelers access the services, but also to promote positive mental health among the community at community level, at grassroots level. And a lot of also we undertake research as part of my role. And I think the data coming from Ireland about the mental health of travelers and the needs of travelers, they're very similar to those of the Roma community all over Europe. And in fact, the model presented by Belém and Daniela is the biopsychosocial approach is very similar to a mental health promotion approach, which focuses exactly on the structural, social, and individual determinants of health. So, just like Daniela and Belém have highlighted, also from a mental health promotion perspective, we need to be focusing on the individual level, so promoting higher self-esteem, higher mental health literacy, resilience within travelers and Roma. And then from a social level also, we need to be seeing the community being more connected with mainstream society, tackling discrimination. These are very important issues from a societal point of view. And then at the structural level, we've talked about, you already described, how housing is very important, access to education is hugely important. And then, of course, income, employment, all these are structural determinants of health, which are very important for mental health as well. So I think you in the presentation, you have touched already all the important things that are important for the mental health of travelers. In my own research, I think something just interesting to highlight is the fact that mental health sometimes is misunderstood, and there is misconceptions around mental health. And therefore, I think it is important to create more mental health literacy. So talk about mental health, to talk what is mental health, and just create this understanding that mental health is not sickness, because when people speak about mental health, they think about depression, anxiety, but mental health is not, that's mental illness, so mental health is a positive concept. So creating this awareness can break the stigma, it can create literacy, which is very important for people help-seeking behavior, so for accessing, for example, services. And also an important topic is the fact that when people talk about health and mental health, they think about mental health services. But from a mental health promotion perspective, when we talk about health, we think about the fact that health is created, in the environments where we live, we study, where we work, where we play, where we love, So that's how health is created. So by tackling those issues, we will create, a better mental health for Roma and for travelers. So yeah, in Ireland also we lack evidence about what type of programs work for travelers in terms of mental health promotion programs. So there are no mental health promotion programs for travelers specifically. So, but there are lots of different mental health promotion training and programs for the general population. So, and this could be developed and targeted for members of the traveling community, but also for Roma around Europe. And these are programs that, for example, these are evidence-based programs that aim to create more resilience, that aim to create mental health literacy, and also, but aims to create understanding about the emotions, for example, and create a better emotional and social situations for travelers in Roma. So so a lot of programs can be implemented and delivered to travelers in Roma and to promote positive mental health besides the structural determinants. But then also just to finish, I think the comment from about early years and focusing on children is very important. By focusing on the early years and working with travelers and Roma children, we can create a new generation of Roma and travelers that are better equipped, that are more educated. They have better skills to face the challenges that life brings about. So I just want to conclude here and thank you for inviting me, and I hope I can contribute in the future to the Roma Health Network with the experience from Ireland. Thank you, Thomas, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much as well, Jacopo. Definitely something that I really enjoyed about your intervention here is that it allows us to take the step also a bit more focused on mental health itself and on mental health promotion, as you talked about. And also one thing that I wanted to have covered today as well, which you mentioned, is the stigma that surrounds mental health, especially in your case, traveler, but in Roma communities, there can be a stigma that surrounds mental health, and it's maybe not something that is talked about a lot, and that's precisely why it's so important to also keep in mind that that national governments set up mental health promotion projects in a similar sense that you talked about just now. I would like to quickly look if we have any questions from the audience. I don't know if we can have a look at the chat real quick, just to see if there's anything that was unclear. But it looks like we don't have any questions from the audience. Now, I do have some questions prepared myself, but I think in this case we will skip them, mainly also because a lot of it has already been covered. So what we will do now is we will move on back to the presentation, and we will go to Borjan, who will talk about the next step. So we've been talking a lot about what can be done and what has been done regarding mental health. But we'd like to take the next step now to something that is slightly different, but that is still related to the topic of capacity building, and that is the community of practitioners on accountability and social action in health, a network that's a Flashling network that's partly being carried by Borjan Pavlovski. So Borjan, if you would take the floor again and would briefly take us through the COPASA network, and if you can keep it in about 5 minutes, please. You have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, Thomas. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Something that I didn't mention during my presentation is that when we are working on Roma health issues on different aspects: women reproductive health, health of mother and children, and other issues besides mental health. In our work, we used human rights-based approach. It's a community-based approach. We engage the communities, not the Roma CSOs or national CSOs to advocate for the community, but we are empowering the communities to advocate for themselves and to demand accountability from the government or from local health providers to fulfill their rights. Next slide, please. That's why we have established the European branch of the Global COPASA network. This is a network, a community, where practitioners who share an interest and passion for the field of community work for accountability in health interact regularly. Which are the practitioners? Mostly civil society organizations, but also individuals which work with different vulnerable communities, Roma, but it's not only limited to Roma, but different marginalized and vulnerable communities in order to empower them, for them to demand accountability for fulfillment of their health rights. Next slide, please. Through this network, we exchange experience and lessons. We are sharing resources, capacities, and methods that we work from our work with vulnerable communities, and we are producing knowledge as well. We share our knowledge, we share our methods in order for organizations to be able to learn from each other. We do a lot of networking and capacity building through different workshops, seminars, webinars, newsletter, and now we are striving also to start to conduct joint advocacy. Most of our members are from the Southeastern Europe, but we are open for all the European organizations working with vulnerable communities. Next, please. The global COPASAC, the European COPASAC was established last year, but the global COPASAC exists 12 years, and it unites practitioners working on social accountability and action in health from Asia, Africa, and Latin America, and now Europe as well. Next, please. So any civil society organization or individual that is working, or maybe it's not working, but is interested to work on the accountability, work on the human rights-based approach, including the vulnerable communities, for achievement of the right to health and for the achievement of the rights and entitlements of the vulnerable groups, all of them are welcome to join our network. Here you have the links for the COPASAC Europe to see what we are doing and to join, and informational link about the global COPASAC. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope that there will be interested members to join in this network, which is still emerging and still building on the European level. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Borjan. So with that, I think we've come to a very good point to conclude the session. We ended up precisely where we began, where we started talking about capacity building, and we've ended there as well. Obviously, we've seen a lot of examples on the mental health side. Can we go to the next slide, please? But one of the main things that we also wanted to talk about, and really that is the main takeaway from this event, is capacity building, a word that I've repeated many times now during this event. Because obviously also this week, during the Romani week, we talk a lot about action plans, we talk a lot about strategies on the European level, on the national level. But also a personal belief of mine is that in the end, where the real action happens is on the local level. And that is why this sort of capacity building is extremely important. Now, obviously, health is only one small aspect of the overall approach to anti-Gypsyism, the sectoral effects of anti-Gypsyism. But as you could have seen today, with this human rights approach to mental health, we still see all of these social determinants of health come together and have their effect, in this case on mental health, but in general also on Roma inclusion and on Roma participation. Now, obviously, you know, we have Zoran here, who is part of the grassroots organization. We had Klimaka, who works also on the grassroots level. And these are the people who we really want to provide these tools to. And that's precisely what CESPID did by developing this mental health model. And really, our main takeaway that we want you to take home today after this event is to look at this mental health model, but also look at for example, the COPASA network that Borjan described, that these are just examples of tools, and there are many others, but just examples of tools that can be used to really drive meaningful change on the local level. But we still need to keep in mind that we also still keep that connection to the national and the European level. So that is the thought that I would like to conclude with today. Now, obviously, if you have any questions, I would gladly accept them. My contact information is on the slide. If you have any questions regarding the COPASA network or the mental health model, or perhaps questions specifically to Borjan or Zoran, I would invite you to send me an email, get in contact with me. CESPID's contact information is also on the slide. Do get in contact with them regarding the mental health model if it's of interest to you. If you work with Roma, or if you are a pro-Roma NGO and you are interested in using the model. So with that, I would like to conclude this event, and indeed also, even though online, I would like also to conclude the Romani Week. This was the last event. It's been a long week, but it's also a very intense week, but it's also been an amazing week. We've got to hear a lot of different approaches to Roma, Roma inclusion, participation, many different topics. And I would like to just very quickly take the time to do some small to give some small thanks. So obviously, the first person I would like to thank is Romeo Franz and his office for organizing the Romani Week, the first one in a long time since the pandemic to be physical again. But in particular, I would like to thank his team, of course. Marius, Tudor, you've done a great job. I'm really happy that you allowed so many of us to do our events at the Romani Week and to really all of us share our voices that are important to us and that are important to the Roma.
Because you deserve it.
Yeah, but just thank you very much, Marius.
You are professionals. You were part of the best team that I've ever had for a Romani Week.
I completely agree. I would like to have that pointed out as well. We've had an amazing coordination group. I was really happy every week. There were always interesting questions. Everybody was on top of their business. So that's really something that we should mention. Aside from that, even though they're not here anymore, I'm really grateful. I'm very happy that the Romani Week this year included Romani interpretation, interpretation in Romanes. The interpreters are not here anymore, but still I would like to really thank them very much, because it's very important that we have Romanes interpretation, because we are talking about Roma, and it's crucial that the people that we do this work for can also hear what we have to say and how we're trying to help them and how they can help themselves. And the only way to do that is if they can follow that information in their own language. So I would also really like to thank the Romani interpreters. And then lastly, here in the room as well with us, the technicians with their amazing patience. I'm really thankful. This event, as well as all the others, went as well as they could have gone. Of course, there were some hiccups, but that is to be expected. But overall, everything went very well. So thank you very much. So with that, I would like to conclude. Thank you very much for attending our event. Thank you very much for attending the Romani Week, in whichever capacity you may have done that. And hopefully we'll see you next year at the Romani Week 2023. So thank you very much, and goodbye.